so much for joining us here today. We really appreciate it. Thank you again so much for joining us. We are going to be talking today a little bit about Eric Adams' big win in the Democratic mayoral race. It was just a little bit of a squeaker over Catherine Garcia, who had an unexpected late surge, but it wasn't enough to overcome adamantum, I guess you'd call it. Eric Adams winning on a very interesting coalition, which I think the left can learn a lot from about the nature of the kind of electoral momentum in the city at this time. Also, we are taking a look at what's been going on over at Amazon, where they've been doing this thing for a while, but there's been an interesting story about this, actually, in the Seattle Times I want to get to, about this Amazon former Army veteran driving packages around, really taking pride in his job. Not a lot of fun, but it's hard work. And the next day, due to a rating on an app, he is fired and out of a job. Also, there's been some major leakage from the Kamala Harris campaign. We'll take you a look, or Kamala Harris VP office, I should say now. We'll take a look at some of that drama to end the show, but we're going to start today with massive corruption in the Biden administration and Senate. Exxon detailing in a leaked audio recording about how they buy off senators to get their big priorities passed, especially in the wake of this infrastructure bill. And it looks like that lobbying has worked. Yeah, probably one of the more disturbing stories of actually in quite a while, that this Exxon story here, really putting it all out in the open, how bought off our government is. I think it's quite obvious that I really think most people just assume that the government is bought off without any questions being asked. Like it's obvious, it's clear, it's there, everybody knows it, and everyone kind of understands it. So when they see stories like this, they're not surprised. But this is kind of interesting, like how it was done. This is in the Washington Post. Keith McCoy thought he was talking to a job recruiter. Speaking on a Zoom video call in May, the longtime Washington lobbyist talked openly about efforts to blunt the Biden administration's climate agenda on behalf of the nation's largest oil and gas company, Exxon Mobil. In reality, it wasn't a job interview. It was a sting conducted by Greenpeace UK, which is an environmental group that was conducting this, recording it from more than 3,000 miles away, of course, in the UK. So the release of this explosive, secretly recorded video has sent a shockwave across the Atlantic, through the White House, and Congress as they debate a major infrastructure package and the extent to which it should invest in clean energy initiatives that will directly compete with oil companies like Exxon. McCoy, the company's senior director for federal relations, described how ExxonMobil selects senators on which to apply pressure. The oil firm's public support for a tax on carbon emissions, he said, was an easy talking point with little chance of ever passing. Nobody is going to propose a tax on all Americans, and the cynical side of me says, yeah, we kind of know that. So pretty much really being honest about a lot of this, like the fact that they're supporting a carbon tax, which is pretty much something that conservatives have supported and say will be kind of a better mitigation measure, a better pay for than raising taxes on corporations. Exxon supporting that because they say it is more like it just looks better and they're doing something, but deep down they know it's never going to pass. And most likely the people supporting it know that as well. And they're probably being like the word on the street is that is the position to support. And, you know, it is interesting to think about, you know, the dynamics of that. Are lobbyists pushing Republicans to support this carbon tax and advocating for it with the assumption and the knowledge that it's not going to pass? Or are the lobbyists taking their cues from Republican senators? I'm willing to bet it is the former. Secondly, it is kind of interesting here how we're already seeing these excerpts. They're not coming from big. They're not coming from big American newspapers. This journalism is like the American press has completely ceded any sort of like journalistic interest in this stuff. And you know, sure, they'll do a great story about, you know, local reporting, or about, you know, another big profile was about how scary Joe Rogan is, or about how, these are both the New York Times talking about. I guess I'm picking the New York Times a little bit unfairly, but this applies to everybody. I don't quite expect it from CNN, but maybe Washington Post, New York Times. They could do a story about, the racism at ESPN or how, scary Joe Rogan is, but they're not going to pick up on, and credit to Greenpeace UK and their Unearthed vertical, working here in collaboration with Channel 4 to get this story out. But it really shows you how much the American press has been dropping the ball on this. I think there was another big story that about Amazon destroying things in warehouses, completely good products were being just chucked, and that was picked up by Channel 4. Even though it was kind of happening in America, it is really quite, ITV, that's another British broadcaster. It has been a little bit of a mea culpa for the normally unapologetic Exxon. In a blog post Friday, CEO Darren Woods called the recorded comments entirely inconsistent with our commitment to the environment, transparency, and what our employees and management team have worked towards since I became CEO 4 years ago. So pretty much complete and utter ass covering here. This is exactly how they do the real business. This is exactly how the cookie or the quote unquote sausage gets made there, because that is the most important part of their profitability is their interaction with the government and how successful they have been able to be in that factor. So, what he's doing here is he's describing how the sausage gets made. So he reiterated the company's positions. Public position in support of the Paris Climate Agreement, which really just shows you how ridiculous of a promise that was from Joe Biden. The big thing I'm going to do for you guys, Jack, it's get you back in the Paris Climate Accord. That's what's going to save us. And if you see, I don't care how much marketing they do, people. Please, if you're listening to this, if you see a fossil fuel company come out in support of a climate measure, know that climate measure is bullshit, and it's not going to do a single thing to make climate change better. Because these people, the world could be crumbling down around them, and it literally is, they don't care. They're still in it for profit as long as they possibly could be. Ro Khanna, top Democratic lawmakers, asking for Woods to testify in Congress broadly about the company's communication on climate change, while lawmakers named in the video are distancing themselves from the company. It's been a little bit embarrassing for these people. People have been named. He's like, yeah, these are the lawmakers we like to buy off. The clips arrive just weeks after, again, Exxon spent millions of dollars in an unsuccessful effort to keep a slate of new independent directors off its board. Activist hedge fund leaders and pensions managers who pushed for the new board members say the company has failed to deal with climate change and plans for decarbonizing its operations. Really, what should happen is, these companies that have are literally the biggest reasons why we're in the crisis we are in now, through their constant lying, their constant manipulation, and their constant lobbying and just buying off of this government and many, many past governments for generations to make sure that absolutely no action is done on this, have all the responsibility in the world, and honestly don't deserve to run, in my opinion, their companies in a completely free market way. They have lost that privilege, and the crisis that we're in, the lives that are being lost, the both animal lives and human lives, and more human lives and resources pretty soon. ExxonMobil has no right and is in no position to run their company, and neither are Chevron, who is currently leading a literal campaign to ruin the life of Steven Donziger, the lawyer there who won a massive $10 billion judgment against them. So that is exactly where they are right now. And they're not, you can see all the marketing. You could see a great ad about them, helping some fishies. That's cute. But you cannot forget, you really cannot forget who these people really are and what their real motivations are. In the video, McCoy argues that Biden's goals for cutting greenhouse gas emissions are insane. The president campaigned on making the country carbon neutral by the middle of the century, saying, quote, "We're playing defense because President Biden is talking about this big infrastructure package, and he's going to pay for it by increasing corporate taxes." Which, by the way, I don't even get it. They don't pay it anyway. It's what's the big deal? McCoy had also admitted that Exxon funded outside organizations that sought to stymie past governments to halt raising temperatures, saying, quote, "Do we join some of these, quote-unquote, shadow groups to work against some of their early efforts? Yes, that's true, but there's nothing illegal about that." Exactly. A lot of stuff there's nothing illegal about. It's just built into the system by politicians who are paid off by legal bribes. So this is how it works. Exxon pays legal bribes to politicians who get into office and create a legal system where these companies can do whatever they want without any fear of retribution, and it all is legal. That's the truth. Well, not all of it, but we're going to find more about that. So, as he described, targeting Senate moderates as well as those up for re-election, even as he described targeting Senate moderates as well as those up for re-election, even as several of the Democratic lawmakers named in the video, including Senators Mark Kelly, Kyrsten Sinema, John Tester, say they never spoke with McCoy during the bipartisan infrastructure talks. The office of Senator Maggie Hassan of New Hampshire said she never heard of McCoy. Oh, okay. Well, I'll take your word for it then. They're all lying. I'm sorry. At no time during the bipartisan infrastructure negotiations did Kyrsten... we spoke with him one day before. My bad. This is probably going to come out somewhere like that. Did Kyrsten speak with this individual, nor would she be influenced by anything other than what is best for Arizona. Again, absolute bull crap. Steaming load of it. That's from the spokesperson there. McCoy claimed to talk to every week. He claimed to talk to Senator Joe Manchin, just weekly, a check-in from the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, the chair of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee. But the senator's office said McCoy was aggrandizing himself during what he thought was a job interview. So, again, who are you going to trust? Someone who's speaking openly and honestly without fear of recording, or someone who just got caught looking really, really bad and is trying to cover their ass? Like, I know who I believe. Progressive activists seized on the video to urge Democrats to ignore Exxon's concern to pass major climate legislation. It's time for Biden to pick a side, Exxon or the American majority, says Varshani Prakash, the executive director of Sunrise, and Alexandra Rojas, executive director of Justice Democrats, said in a joint statement. Again, this is the key part. This is really why they have Hague-level responsibility and criminal responsibility to this. Throughout much of the 1990s and 2000s, Exxon contended in the science of climate change was too uncertain to act upon, even as its in-house scientists pioneered early greenhouse gas research decades prior. They knew about this stuff decades prior. They're looking into this. They know how bad it is. But they're like, guys, we're not entirely sure, so don't do anything too crazy on this. Don't kill us here. Anyway, so for months, Connor's subcommittee has been planning to hold a hearing in the fall on the spread of misinformation about climate change, threatening to subpoena Exxon if it didn't cooperate. They have a self-interest to participate to clear their name. If they refuse to participate and it comes to a subpoena, that's going to be a pretty big indictment and would undermine everything Darren Woods said. Yeah, so the recording, of course, raises questions of the ethics of using subterfuge to get sources to speak candidly, a practice condoned at times in British journalism, but generally off limits for mainstream American reporters. Again, just the disgusting paragraph there from the Washington Post, again implying exact same way that some forces did after those tax leaks, taxes of billionaires showing that what taxes, they didn't pay any. After that fact was leaked, the biggest question for Biden's administration and many conservatives was, isn't it so disturbing that the IRS, some of the IRS is leaking American taxes? Like, this is a big crime. Like, not the fact that, the top 20 richest people are paying a fraction of a percent, or a fraction of 10% when it comes to taxes. Like, that is not what they're thinking about. They're thinking about, how do we punish leakers? And again, this is not necessarily a British journalist, and no, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. This is unquestionably the right thing to do, and ethics are literally the only ethics violation here in place in the eyes of people like Washington Post. This is an ethics violation, is upsetting people like ExxonMobil and making them look bad. That is the only ethics violation. It's like, hey, you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to actually get real, useful, valuable information. No, you're supposed to talk about, like the latest horse race politics. You're supposed to take the word of, Senate sources, or, like national security state sources, or Exxon sources, about how they're trying the best that they can, and they really want a carbon tax to pass because they know it's going to be better. Like, it's so ridiculous. So this tape, it was apparently 3 years in the making, according to Lawrence Carter, a reporter at Unearthed, a Greenpeace UK affiliate. He began looking for ways to investigate the energy industry's lobbying on climate change after several oil majors, including Exxon, came out and supported the Paris Climate Accord, which calls for capping warming below 2 degrees Celsius. With lobbying stories, so much of it's happening behind closed doors, said Carter. Orchestrated the recording, feeding questions to an interviewer Unearthed hired. We felt that going undercover was the only way we were going to really reveal Exxon's lobbying. It's not something you would do lightly because it is an invasion of privacy. But again, it is in the public interest undisputably. So it's kind of ridiculous that these people get privacy and they get rights. Like they get the right to have, to talk to politicians, to buy them off, to suppress climate science that will cost people millions of lives, and literally destroying the planet. But what are we supposed to care about? Their right to privacy, sure. It's really, really kind of hilarious also that the United States is pretending that they're so above board on this. They're so good, and they would never do anything, because journalists in the United States, they have a strict ethical code. Again, please, give me a break. All right. We are going to speaking of a break, we're going to take one. We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to the Spencer Walsh Radio Network. I want to tell you a little bit about our lineup for this summer. We start off with Newsflash, all new, of course, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You can't miss it. It's our flagship show to get caught up on everything happening in the world around you. But stick around for some history and some entertainment. Learn about all the things you never learned in history class every Thursday with Hidden History. And get ready for a fun night out, or turn your living room into the club with uncultured live mixes every Saturday all summer long. The Spencer Walsh Radio Network is your home for summer sounds coming all season long. Every podcast is available everywhere, so you have no excuse not to listen. Apologize for that. There's a little bit of a microphone malfunction. We're going to now move on to our next story, and that is Eric Adams. He has just won the mayoral race. I believe he won last night, but still, he rose from poverty to become an iconoclastic police captain, and the borough president for Brooklyn declared victory in the Democratic nomination for mayor in New York City on Tuesday, putting him on track to become the second black mayor in the history of the nation's largest city. The contest was called by the AP on Tuesday night. It was seen as one of the city's most critical elections in a generation, with the winner expected to help set New York on a recovery course from the economic devastation of COVID-19 and the long-standing racial and socioeconomic inequalities the pandemic deepened. But as the campaign entered its final months, a spike in shootings and homicides drove public safety and crime to the forefront of voters' minds, and Adams, the only leading candidate with a law enforcement background, moved urgently to demonstrate authority on the issue. So Adams held an 8,400 vote lead over Catherine Garcia, a margin of 1 percentage point, small enough that it was not immediately clear whether she or any of his opponents could contest the result in court. All three leading candidates have vowed to maintain the option to challenge the results. If no one does, Adams' victory could be certified as soon as next week. So it looks like that's not going to happen, as Catherine Garcia, the second closest candidate, has just conceded to Adams that he will be the Democratic nominee. And it really shows a very, very interesting political dynamic here at play. What we are seeing is a kind of like, I've kind of been pushing up back on this narrative, as you well know, about, he is a epitome of someone who has been, he's winning because Americans are sick of progressive criminal policy and want a change on that front. I don't think that's right. I think what's going on is he's a pretty popular Brooklyn borough president, kind of part of the Brooklyn machine, and won on kind of, a lot of retail politics and a lot of, some criminal background, but like in the same, like we had in the same areas where Adams won, we had like DSA city council people that called for, defunding the police, all that stuff. So, people were voting for, they were sending very mixed messages on crime. And of course, all across the country, we talked about this on the show recently, where we've seen pretty good results. We got, I believe, Brad Lander winning at comptroller. It's a progressive win. Alvin Bragg for DA, not the most progressive candidate, but also he was a pretty progressive. It was pretty much the biggest mainstream progressive choice. It was either him or Tally Farhadian Weinstein, which was the Clinton pick, who was kind of a really big money kind of business as usual type candidate. So Adams held the 8,400 vote lead again over Kathy Garcia, margin of 1 percentage point. And Adams said, "We have an historic, diverse five-borough coalition led by working-class New Yorkers, and that's how we won the Democratic primary for New York City." That's Adams saying that in a statement. The results came after the city's Board of Elections counted 118,000 absentee ballots and deployed a ranked choice elimination system, the first time New York has used it in a mayoral election. So these ranked choice systems were, they were a little bit controversial. And it was a pretty striking result, though, for Garcia, for Catherine Garcia. She did it pretty well. Wiley did pretty well. And, of course, Adams is going to be the favorite in the general election against Curtis Sliwa. The final round matchup between Adams and Garcia illustrates some of the sharp divisions in the Democratic Party along the lines of race, class, and education. Not really so much ideology, because pretty much every major candidate who had a shot in winning this race was a moderate. I don't think Miles Wiley even was that progressive. So Adams, he cast himself as a blue-collar candidate. He led in every borough except Manhattan in the tally of first-choice votes and was the strong favorite among working-class Black and Latino voters. He demonstrated strength with white voters who also held more moderate views, especially some data suggests among voters who did not have college degrees, a coalition that's been likened to the one that propelled Joe Biden to the Democratic nomination as in 2020. But probably, I would argue, more strong, because Biden didn't have really Latino support. He had some Black support in some regions, and was definitely very strong with kind of older white voters. Not even necessarily those who didn't have college degrees, but it is very interesting to see like the tying together. What tied all these disparate groups together? Like these people. You could say that they have a material identity that could be tied around by a certain set of key economic policies that Eric Adams was issuing. No, there was that's a weird thing. He didn't have these policies. He had an incredibly pro big money policy, pro status quo policies, and also used something that's supposedly very unpopular, which is identity politics, like the territory of Twitter. The territory of woke culture. Adams was using race all the time in his campaigning, and what many probably on the other side of it would argue was a very dirty and underhanded style of campaigning. And he also went around to contrast that. He went around going, "Twitter is not real life" all the time, and he still put together a coalition of people of different races. And mostly a working class led coalition. So it's very interesting to see how that has turned around. So meanwhile, Garcia, a former sanitation commissioner who ran a message of technocratic competence, was popular with white moderate voters across the 5 boroughs, but she was overwhelmingly the candidate of Manhattan, dominating in some of the wealthiest zip codes in the country. She appeals to highly educated, more affluent voters across the ideological spectrum there and in parts of Brownstone, Brooklyn, even as she struggled to connect with voters of color elsewhere in the kinds of numbers it would have taken to win. The results that capped a remarkable stretch in the city's political history. The race began in a pandemic and took several unexpected twists in the final weeks as one candidate confronting accusations of sexual misconduct dating back decades that, again, were not proven to be true, most likely bullshit. And another faced a campaign implosion, and Adams, under fire over residency questions, offered reportedly a tour of a Brooklyn apartment where he said he lived. Of course, he had the vote tallying disaster and the Board of Elections. It's been a long journey, but this awful, awful election that I really hated watching was a big. It's finally over, folks. It's finally over. Wiley, meanwhile, she ran as a favorite of young left-wing voters. She had sought to build a multiracial coalition, kind of in the same way Adams done, but she earned the support of some of New York's prominent Democratic members of Congress. The apparent victory of Adams, though, who embraces a relatively expansive role for law enforcement promoting public safety, amounts to a rebuke of the left wing of the party that promoted far-reaching efforts to scale back the power of police, which, by the way, has not been done in New York. The race was a vital, if imperfect, test of Democratic attitudes around crime amid a national wave of gun violence amid American cities. Again, every other election result in the state does not reflect this pattern. So every other one does not reflect this pattern, which really makes me think that there is something else pushing this. I don't know quite what, but it just doesn't seem like that is quite reflective. All right, we're going to move on now to our next story. Stephen Normandin spent almost 4 years around Phoenix delivering packages as a contract driver for Amazon. Then one day he received an automated email. The algorithms tracking him had decided he wasn't doing his job properly. 63-year-old Army veteran was stunned. He'd been fired by a machine. Normandin says that Amazon pushed him for things beyond his control, punished him for things beyond his control, such as locked apartment complexes that prevent him from completing his deliveries. He said he really took the termination hard, and priding himself on a strong work ethic, recalled that during his military career, he helped cook for 250,000 Vietnamese refugees at Fort Chaffee in Arkansas. I'm the kind of old school guy, and I give every job 110%. This really upset me because we're talking about my reputation. They said I didn't do the job when I know damn well I did. So Normandin's experience is a twist on a decades-old prediction that robots will replace workers. Well, robots are literally just going to fire them because it's the quote-unquote smarter and more profitable thing to do. Because robots, if they're programmed by human robots like Jeff Bezos, are going to only see profit. They're going to only see what makes the most amount of sense at the right time to do for Amazon's bottom line. And I mean, just like, what a story here, right? Like, right off the top, we see someone who has, he's been working hard. He's worked hard all his life. He served this country. He's been nothing but good. Gives every job 110%. Works, grinds all day. And I mean, most bosses, I would say, are bad. Go out, put that out there in the limb. But any human boss would be like, oh, your apartment complex is locked. Nothing you can do. Don't want to fire you over that. But in Amazon, things are just different. Amazon became the world's largest online retailer in part by outsourcing its sprawling operations to algorithms, sets of computer instructions designed to solve specific problems. For years, the company used algorithms to manage the millions of third-party merchants on its online marketplace. Drawing clients and sellers have been booted off after being falsely accused of selling counterfeit goods and jacking up prices. Increasingly, the company is seeding its human resources operation machines as well, using software to not only manage workers in its warehouses, but to oversee contract drivers, independent delivery companies, and even the performance of its office workers. People familiar with the strategy say Chief Executive Officer Jeff Bezos believes machines make decisions more quickly and more accurately than people, reducing costs and giving Amazon a competitive advantage. So it's important to understand here, this comes from the top. This is what Amazon wants. This is exactly the foundation, the basis for the company's success, which is literal exploitation, literally working you to the death, or not to the death, but to the bone, until a point where you're in a really precarious situation. You can't just be put in you can't just be knocked out of your job and expect everything to go fine, especially in the economic world that we live today. And if you're working at Amazon, you're probably not in the best economic situation. You're not completely secure economically. So losing a source of income, at $15 an hour, but maybe in a rural area. I don't know what part of Phoenix he's in. I don't specifically know the area of Phoenix that well. But if this guy, he loses a job, then that puts him in a situation where he could be out in the street. And all because of what? An apartment complex was locked, and some algorithm says you're not performing your job, even though you've been busting your ass every day. Some app is like, beep, beep, beep. you're homeless. Like, that is literally the world we are living in. This is happening all around us, and it's only the beginning. Amazon hired 63%, in 2019, Amazon had 63% less workers than it ended up having in 2020. So they hired, I believe, something like 700,000 people last year. They're expanding, they're getting bigger, and they're moving all over the place. And this is going to be probably a more common thing. We're seeing Walmart now giving Samsung smartphones to every single one of its workers. Of course, they're going to be, it comes with a catch. They're going to be tracked. Their hours are going to be monitored, all that stuff. Their breaks are going to be scrutinized heavily, and they're going to be worked and pushed to the bone. So this has been a very interesting. This is the next person. So when Ryan Cope was deactivated in 2019, didn't bother arguing or consider paying for arbitration. But then Cope had already decided there was no way he can meet the algorithm's demands. Driving miles along winding dirt roads and outside Denver in the snow, he often shook his head in disbelief that Amazon expects the customer to get the package within 2 hours. Wherever there's an issue, there's no support, said Cope, 29. It's against the machine, so you don't even try. When drivers do challenge poor readings, they can't tell if they're communicating with real people. Responses often include just a first name or no name at all, and the replies typically apply to a variety of situations, rather than specific problems. So it's just a very general, form-based, algorithmic-based. And I mean, how far up the chain do you have to go to get to a real human? You could be fired, your job could be lost, and you won't even have a real human to talk to on the way out. Just a stunning picture of American work for so many people. And the trend is not towards this getting better. The trend is this getting worse and getting more common than it already is. All right, we're going to today in a little bit of juicy DC drama. This is in Politico. When Vice President Kamala Harris finally made the decision to visit Mexico last week, people in her own office were blindsided by the news. For days, aides and outside allies have been calling and texting with each other about the political fraud that a potential trip would entail, but it became known that she was going to El Paso. When it became known, it left many people scrambling, including officials who were responsible for making travel arrangements and others outside the VP's office charged with crafting the messaging across the administration. Handling the border visit was the latest chaotic moment for a staff that's quickly become mired in. Harris's team experiencing low morale, poor lines of communication, and diminished trust among aides and senior officials. Much of the frustration internally is directed at Tina Flournoy, Harris's chief of staff, a veteran of Democratic politics who began working for her earlier this year. So apparently a lot of staff are afraid of her, a little really uncomfortable and even talking, challenging Kamala in any way because they have to go through Tina. In interviews, 22 current and former vice presidential aides, administration officials, and associates of Harris and Biden described a tense and at times dour office atmosphere. Aides and allies say Flournoy, in an apparent effort to protect Harris, created an insular environment where ideas were ignored or met with harsh dismissals or decisions are dragged out. Often, they said she refuses to take responsibility for delicate issues and blames the staffers for negative results that ensue. While much of the ire is aimed at Harris's chief, two administration officials say that the VP herself also bears responsibility for the way the office is run. It all starts at the top, said one of the administration officials who, like others, requested anonymity. People are thrown under the bus from the very top. There are short fuses, and it's an abusive environment. It's not a healthy environment, and often people feel mistreated. It's not a place where people feel supported, but a place where people feel treated like shit. So, just pretty much saying the same thing 3 times there in that quote. Nice. Dysfunction in the VP's ranks threatens to complicate the White House's carefully crafted image as a place staffed by a close-knit group of professionals working in concert to advance the president's agenda. It's pronounced enough that members of the president's own team have taken notice or are concerned about the way Harris's staffers are treated. Simone Sanders, of course, denied that. But Harris and Flournoy's defenders note that women in power, black women in particular, are subjected to standards that men don't often have to clear. So this is going to be pretty much, I think, the number one defense of Kamala here. her continued failures, the continued bleak drip of bad stories about how incompetent she is, about how she doesn't really have a strategy, about how she runs a very insular environment. She doesn't take a lot of kind of constructive or kind of any criticism or new ideas. And also the fact that people in the Biden White House now are saying they're not sure if Biden steps down and doesn't, for some reason, I know it sounds crazy, but he ends up not seeking the Democratic nomination at 81 years old in 3 years' time. If Harris wins and Harris runs, they're openly questioning right now in the pages of Axios or the web pages of Axios if she's going to be able to win. And they say it's going to be hard to replace her because, of course, she's the first black woman vice president. But that is really the biggest thing keeping her afloat. These standards that she uses to complain when people criticize her for failing to meet basic standards of competency and internal organization and just, efficiency, she uses those standards to criticize other people and to suggest that they're like treating her unfairly, while also that being the main thing keeping her running. This identity game that has completely annihilated the upper ranks of kind of the establishment of I'd say more the middle ranks of the establishment of the Democratic Party, because the upper ranks of the establishment of the Democratic Party, of course, they're all 8 years old. They don't care. For some of the people who know Harris best, it's become an all too familiar pattern for a politician who has churned through several iterations of staff on her rise and took an office with a team almost entirely new to her. Just 6 months in, some of the aides of the office of the vice president said they're eyeing other employment opportunities. Others have left already. Two top advanced staffers, Carly Satkowiak and Gabrielle DeFranceschi, parted ways with Harris in what they said, and Harris officials said were long planned departures, a point disputed by two people familiar with the matter. So, not quite the best when you can't even agree on how your two top advanced staffers left. For DeFranceschi, the deputy director of Advance, the departure came down to a difference of opinion on how things should run, according to a person familiar with the matter, who said that Harris's office is run very different from the Obama operation, where DeFranceschi previously worked. If you have an opinion about things should run, how things should run, and it's not listened to, that can be very frustrating. A third Harris aide who worked on the digital team, Rajan Kaur, left the staff after opting to not relocate to Washington from Brooklyn. Anita Dunn, a long-time senior advisor to the president, and also I believe someone who defended Harvey Weinstein, defended Flournoy as well as the decision to keep the news of the border strip contained among the small group of people, and saying Harris's office didn't want it to leak or make it turn into a spectacle. So Flournoy, she's a longtime Democratic operative who worked on President Bill Clinton's White House as well as Clinton's re-election campaign and Vice President Al Gore's 2000 campaign. She's part of an informal group of black women who worked together for decades in Democratic politics, including Donna Brazile, Mindy Moore, Leah Daughtry, and Yolanda Caraway. Look, Teen isn't strong, she's intelligent, she's driven, she expects strong, driven, intelligent people around her. But some people may think she's intimidating, but that's her intent, says Daughtry. She's one of them respected among operatives beyond that group as well. Indeed, some of the biggest names in Democratic politics who got word of it called in advance of the story to speak well of her. Others took to Twitter on Tuesday to push back on a CNBC report saying that Flournoy's role as a gatekeeper for Harris was roiling outside allies and big donors who have seen their access to her severely curtailed. I mean, look, to give her credit, we don't know exactly what's happening. If if she's turning away people like the man we talked about, McCoy there, Kevin McCoy, in the beginning of the story, that Exxon lobbyist, if she's curtailing access to them, I say, good for you. Like, thank you. You're making our public servants more serving towards the public. Like, I appreciate that. But one thing that should not be ignored is the fact that that's probably not happening, and this, by all accounts, this operation seems very dysfunctional. It's a story that should definitely be paid attention to as we get closer and closer to 2024, where things could really get interesting. Kamala Harris, she's not really in a big position of power right now, but she could be running again as the Democratic nominee, where she most likely will get her, her you-know-what kicked in the 2024 election. Like her own staffers fear it. So that is definitely something to consider and a space to watch for down the road. All right, that's all we got for you today. Thank you so much for listening. Apologize about that mic malfunction there. We will see you on Friday. But join us tomorrow over on Hidden History for a brand new episode.